Everyone, welcome to another Animation Friday. I apologize I had to delay this video. Unfortunately, I was pretty busy over the weekend and did not have time to upload videos. I should be caught up by the end of Thursday. I'm currently still reading a book that I wanted to review. It's just taking me a really long time to read it because it is very, very long. Almost too long. I almost want to say it's even longer than Anna Karenina, or at least it feels that way. But but I hope to have that done and have everything uploaded by the end of Thursday. But without further ado, though, let me address what I wanted to talk about for this particular Animation Friday, and that has to do with MGM. Believe it or not, MGM has been responsible for various animated television shows and movies throughout the years. Unfortunately, they're not necessarily recognized for their animation only because it is fairly limited, and they didn't receive at least a lot of critical praise. I mean, there were some that received some recognition and do sound familiar, obvious, and have received some awards even, and I will mention those shows as I go through this video, but it's definitely not a game, it's not a big player as far as animation is concerned, unfortunately. And I think it never has really been, but it did provide some interesting insight into how you execute animated television shows and also how you bring about various films that were somewhat unique and were kind of popping here and there over time, even though they didn't really maintain the somewhat consistent brand, I'd say, even though they were kind of a little bit darker, I guess. But let me kind of go through where it sort of all started. Really, it did start with Tom and Jerry, from my understanding, as well as Droopy. And these were initially, from my research, they were featured before theatrical films, which was how primarily animation was done before we had extensive availability of television. And eventually, we also had, and then eventually, after the theatrical kind of animated shorts were being somewhat discontinued, and then we move on to sort of television, there ended up being various specials that MGM was responsible for sort of creating. Primarily Dr. Seuss ones. For example, Horton Hears a Who, and also How the Grinch Stole Christmas. And we also got the Pink Panther. And we got movies like The Secret of Nim and All Dogs Go to Heaven, which I believe were both from Don Bluth, if I'm not mistaken. And also for television shows, we got shows like Scooby-Doo, as well as the Jetsons, which I believe both of them were eventually released sort of on Cartoon Network once that television channel came up. Now, the thing about MGM is that they were kind of a little all over the place, in that they sort of started off being kind of comedical. For example, Tom and Jerry. And Tom and Jerry is probably their most successful out of their earlier material. I think even Tom and Jerry did win some Academy, or not Academy, excuse me. I believe there were some Emmy awards or things like that that were given to them, some kinds of awards. So they were really known for that. Droopy also was pretty famous, but more so the character, I would say, than necessarily the shorts themselves. I would say that Tom and Jerry were sort of more famous for their characters and for the overall presentation of the episodes. That were initially, from my research, were theatrical shorts. And obviously trying to use Dr. Seuss as in or trying to tell Dr. Seuss's stories through animation was an interesting move on their part, and I think it ultimately works. I mean, they're really, I think, known for producing really well executed uh, television specials, at least when it comes to the Dr. Seuss arena. And I think The Grinch Stole Christmas was a really was one that was even, I think, more heavily praised than the Jim Carrey version. So it's safe to, I think, definitely say that they did have a good understanding of that kind of uh, genre of doing these little TV specials. And um, again, I think the fact that they didn't have an overall consistency as far as their branding, unlike DreamWorks or Disney or Pixar, all of that. I think unfortunately, since they don't really necessarily have that, that's what has made them so kind of unrecognizable, unfortunately, over the years. And they've sort of kind of been in and out as far as animation is concerned. They never seem to keep a level of consistency. Um, again, uh, the fact that they had more animated films that were on the darker side. Um, for example, obviously, The Secret of Him and All Dogs Go to Heaven. Um, but at the same time, being somewhat comedical and slapsticky, you could kind of tell that they were sort of trying to follow the times because when Tom and Jerry was out, the slapstick thing was really a Looney Tunes thing, and they sort of begged off of that strategy and decided to really hone in on uh, that genre of comedy. And when you look at the theatrical films, when Don Bluth was releasing the films, primarily animation was sort of more dark. It was a little bit more sinister, a lot less friendly, less colorful. So they were really kind of just following everybody else. They were kind of just the followers of animation. They never really stood out in any way, shape, or form, unfortunately. Um, and it's a shame because, I mean, they did do some good material, I think. It just wasn't as extensive, it wasn't as consistent, and it wasn't as influential. Like, you can't compare MGM to Disney or MGM to Pixar because they're not even really in the same ballpark. And MGM obviously wasn't primarily focused on animation at all, really. So, again, it is safe to say that um, although they were not in the uh, realms of animation all too much, they still had, I think, a thorough understanding of it. I think they just took the good bits that were part of various other animated studios and or at least followed the trends of what was going on during the time within animation and sort of applied it in their own special way. And in doing so, created their own interesting television shows, TV specials, um, animated shorts, and also films. Um, but I think that's really all I can say about MGM as far as their role within animation. But I'd be more than happy to hear what anybody else has to say in regards to this topic. But I think that's really all I can say, though. If any questions, comments, concerns, I'd be more than happy to answer them. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a pleasant day, week, month, year, and I hope to see you all in the next video. Take care. Bye-bye.